Just a quick line of news to bring you that has come to us in the last few minutes. This is a posting on Truth Social from Donald Trump, who says he will not be participating in a second debate with Kamala Harris. There was some speculation as to whether they would appear together on NBC for that second debate, but he's saying in the last few minutes that he's decided not to do a second debate. We've got a panel coming up, of course, at 9 o'clock. We'll maybe discuss that with them. And let's bring in our panel, because I want to talk about these live pictures we're seeing from Charlotte in North Carolina. There is Kamala Harris. She's out on the campaign today. It's quite interesting, North Carolina, because the Republican candidate for governor there, Mark Robinson, he's down 14 points in that race, which I guess gives her some hope, particularly when you consider that polling I showed you a little earlier. Brett, come in on this. I mean, we talked about we'll come back to turnout and to cost of living, but what about this line in our headlines that there isn't going to be a second debate? Donald Trump saying tonight he thought he won the first one, he doesn't need it. Does she need a second debate?
Well, I don't know if you notice some of the feathers that seem to be coming off of Trump today, and that probably is due to the fact that he's chickening out of doing another debate. I don't know what logic would suggest that if you performed well in the first one, why you wouldn't want to do another. But clearly, he has huddled with his advisors. They determined that it was a complete and an utter disaster, one that is best avoided in the future. And that's why, despite what will undoubtedly be some negative headlines tomorrow, he's decided that he's got to make his case directly to the American people. We can expect lots of those big rallies. But as Harris pointed out in the debate, folks have not been turning out in the same numbers. They've not been staying as long as they used to. So Trump, quite frankly, is between a rock and a hard place right now.
Yeah, I mean, Nina, just looking at some of the lines coming out of this rally, she says she believes that we owe it to the voters to have another debate. She might well say that, given that most of the polls that we've seen gave it to her on Wednesday night.
Yeah, that's right. And obviously these key swing states are crucial. And it's believed that obviously the Democratic Party believed that places like North Carolina, that last time they voted for a Democratic president, I believe was Barack Obama's election in 2008, they believed that there might be some wiggle room to actually clinch that state. Recent polling showed that perhaps even just by a margin of 0.3%, Kamala Harris might, well, at the moment be ahead there. And, you know, there's lots of sort of swing voters that she might be able to entice. But on the other hand, I should point out that obviously Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Can't run there now. It's been decided by the North Carolina Supreme Court, and he's obviously thrown his weight behind Trump. So again, it's just an example of how close to call this current election is. And then I'm sure we'll get into this later on throughout the course of the show, how former President Trump would behave if indeed we saw him losing, but by a very, very close margin.
Well, yeah, well, let's talk about that, Sumi, because I know covering the 2020 election and doing the numbers on the screen that night, we were looking at the Republican vote coming in early. But one of the peculiarities of Pennsylvania is that those mail-in ballots, and it does tend to be Democrats who send in the mail-in ballots, those are not tipped into the counting machines until 7 o'clock in the morning on the day of the election. So is there a risk that this time we get that red mirage again that then is swamped by the blue wave that comes in the early hours of the morning?
I think, Christian, we have to be ready for that. Certainly, as you said, you know, mail-in voting is particularly popular among Democrats and also some older voters who don't necessarily want to physically go to the polls themselves. That's something that we saw play a massive role in Pennsylvania in the past. The risk there, of course, is that we see a contested narrative over who wins the state of Pennsylvania. Donald Trump said a few times on that day, of course, if we see Pennsylvania turn blue, that means that they've stolen the election. That wasn't the case, obviously. obviously no proof of that. It was simply that those mail-in ballots were counted, as you said, but that absolutely could be the case. And I think that that's something that we're going to see disputed here in Pennsylvania as well when they talk about the sanctity and the integrity of the election, and could be in other states as well that have higher mail-in voting tallies.
Brett, there was a post that he put on Truth Social where he was basically issuing a cease and desist, saying that those who were cheating, in inverted commas, people like election workers, lawyers, political operatives in the state, that he'd come after them and they'd face the full force of the law. Do you think he's already prepping for that fight in Pennsylvania, given the importance of the state on the night?
Undoubtedly, he and his team are prepping and trying to create the predicate for casting doubt over the results. That being said, there are a few different factors this time around, not least of which is the fact that Americans have gotten a lot smarter when it comes to issues like Nina was raising about how votes are actually tabulated, and those mail-in votes get tabulated after, in many cases, those that were cast on Election Day. On top of that, there is an extra effort happening now to educate both voters, but also, quite frankly, politicians. And then there's the third factor, and I think this is perhaps the most critical one, and you're hearing it whispered around Washington at the moment, and that is that most Republicans are sick and tired of Donald Trump. And so if he loses on the next go around, they are not going to stand with him once again. He will have lost 3 national elections in a row for Republicans, and I think they will seize this as a moment to try and turn the page and write a new chapter for the party.